Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In my last video, I did a reaction to a video of Dr. Cyrus and Dr. Berry discussing a phenomenon called insulin suppression. Dr. Cyrus believes that this phenomenon is something that most or all carnivores will eventually suffer from. I can't tell you whether his assertions are valid, common, rare. I'm not here to really talk about that in particular. But I do give some important insights in that video as to how I believe we should approach test results in general, and how the focus of physicians should be on their patients and results in real life as opposed to a test tube, independent of the organism that's being evaluated. Sadly, the test results are the hyper-focus of physicians these days, not their patients. I'll put that video and the source video in the description section so you can watch it for yourself. That video revolves a lot around laboratory tests, specifically blood testing. I want to talk about this because most people don't understand testing methodologies and the types of clinical laboratory testing. For instance, people hear laboratory test and they automatically think blood test. Most of the time that's what people are talking about, but you can test virtually every body fluid. You can test sputum, blood, feces, urine for a variety of parameters. Also, patients don't typically understand the potential problems with normal reference ranges, as these ranges are most often based on a very sick population. Everyone just accepts everything coming out of the medical industrial complex as gospel, as if the medical orthodoxy is a religious organization, never to be questioned, as opposed to an establishment with foundations rooted in scientific principles. And this is no longer an opinion. I mean, we all lived through 2020, right? Today, I would like to go over a little of my background and why I feel the way I do on this topic. I also want to tell you a personal story from real life that I can validate personally that reinforces my view of the medical industrial complex. I also present in this video a personal account by Kelly Hogan, who's an excellent nutritional influencer here on YouTube that supports what I'm talking about. I will link her video in the description section as well. This is not a video analyzing all the different laboratory tests, but it's foundational for that type of video that I do plan on doing in the future if you guys are interested. If you are, let me know in the comments section below if it sounds like something you want to see. Today, though, we take a higher level approach into laboratory tests versus the human experience, right here on the Carnivore Science channel. First off, who am I to talk to you about laboratory testing? How dare I? I'm not a physician. Well, I'm not, but I do have a background in a lot of this. I have a degree in medical technology. I was licensed by the American Society of Clinical Pathologists, and I also have a chemistry degree. I used that to pursue a career as a pharmaceutical chemist later. Also, after I finished my chemistry degree, I later pursued a degree in chemical engineering. But it was getting kind of costly at that point, and I already had a career in pharmaceuticals and wasn't planning on changing because I'd already changed professions once. So it didn't really make sense to finish the last year or so. The epiphany that I had an addiction to school was when I was griping to a friend about trying to finish a fiction novel that I was working on and I didn't have time for. And he was like, "So why do you want to be an engineer?" And I responded, "I don't. I just like studying it." And he then responded by saying, "Well, you seem to be creating all of your own problems, don't you?" It was at that moment that I decided my second career as a professional college student needed to officially end. I had a good run though. I started college early, around 15. I was in accounting and marketing. Not for me, just saying. But you have to try all the things or you're not going to know what you like, right? In my defense though, this was all before the internet was what we know it today. So just saying, you had to go to libraries and stuff. Anyway, back to the medical arena. I have worked in the medical industry and pharmaceutical industry for over 30 years. My career as a medical technologist came first, and I worked in clinics and mainly hospital laboratories. I earned my degree in medical technology in the mid-'80s. As a medical technologist, and many people I've talked to don't even know what that is, as it does sound kind of vague. But these are the people who take the blood and the different body fluids and analyze them in a clinical lab. I have worked in different hospital laboratories and some reference labs as a generalist, rotating departments. I worked in hematology, microbiology, urinalysis, immunohepatology, which is blood banking, serology, virology, and clinical chemistry. I also had positions exclusively as a microbiologist, which was one of my favorite departments, where I identified different organisms, ran antibiotic sensitivity testing, fungal cultures, and identification and analysis for ova parasites. That's digging through poop. I know it sounds gross, but it's, man, you put it under a microscope and it's like a whole different science fiction universe. It's amazing. I saw a lot of chronic diseases as well as technological innovations over the years of working in this environment. It's kind of depressing. I was working in hospitals in college and afterwards during the height of the AIDS epidemic. I remember vividly when our small town hospital received our first AIDS patient who had this mysterious and terrifying disease. There was a lot that we didn't know back then. I remember doing an India ink test on that patient's spinal fluid, and what I was seeing in there was so rare, we thought the reagent was contaminated. He had Cryptococcus neoformans in his spinal fluid, which is commonly found in pigeon poop. And we were all like, wow, this is so interesting. And it was somewhat exciting to see this because it was so uncommon. You know, when you think about the patient separate from the lab test that you're looking at, though, that reaction makes you feel terrible. Later, I had to take blood from this person since back in the olden days, we rarely had phlebotomists on staff. Those are people who exclusively take the blood. And I had to go up, get set up in almost full hazmat gear and take his blood. He was covered in Kaposi sarcoma lesions. He was really close to death at that point. I felt horrible, and deep down I was terrified. I was always very fascinated with virology, but as far as the world of virology, it's a frightening place. But I don't have to tell you that. I mean, you lived through 2020, right? Need I say more? Probably not if I want to stay on YouTube. But you can imagine, back then, we had Dr. Fauci running around scaring the crap out of everybody. And yes, he was a main player in the AIDS epidemic. Many people don't know that, but he was front and center. And if memory serves me well, and I think it does in this case, he was one of the loudest voices indicating that it could be transmitted much easier than was actually the case. I could be wrong. So as far as I can't find any news clips, but I do remember his little face doing his thing on the news, so to speak. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. I can say personally that kind of work environment with what we knew at the time and all the horrific manifestations of that disease when it first hit the scene, it messes with your head. You are constantly afraid of being exposed either through an accidental needle stick or through an aerosol or from a tube of blood exploding in an unbalanced centrifuge. A funny story, well, it's kind of funny now in hindsight, it wasn't really then, is when I was working in healthcare during the AIDS epidemic, I used to have a recurring nightmare, and it was like every night. I was standing in a long line. It was like a mile long, and I was waiting for something, but I couldn't really see what it was I was waiting for. As I got closer, though, I started to hear the sound of a cartoon bomb dropping. And then some unintelligible voice, but I couldn't make out. As the line moved closer, you could sort of see it looked like a Pac-Man machine or an Asteroids machine, an arcade game that we were standing in wait for. And like I said, to this day, I remember every detail of that dream, even the back of the head of the dude who was standing in front of me in the line. Then I finally was face to face with the screen. The goofy arcade music started to play, and a little plane flies in from the right side of the screen, complete with the little propeller sounds, moving to the center, moving kind of slow, but it gets to the center of the screen and a little bomb drops, you know, that sound from earlier, and it explodes into a mushroom cloud. And then the cloud turns into a message. You are positive. Report to Alpha Base 1. To this day, I have no idea what Alpha Base 1 is. Maybe a quarantine zone in some dystopic future my subconscious had created. I may never know. I'm a fiction author, and most of what I write is in the horror and suspense genre, so this kind of weird shit's just part of the package. But anyway, I got off track. Sorry. So later I went to work for the American Red Cross in their virology lab. Yep, more viruses. That's a real good idea given the previous story.
That was really stupid.
But this is my first experience with the manufacture, rather processing of a regulated product. At the ARC, I worked as a medical technologist in the virology lab testing the nation's blood supply. But it wasn't business as usual. During my time there, they were under what's called a consent decree. A consent decree is issued by a court, and it occurs after serious observations are found by the Food and Drug Administration. In this case, the court order allowed continued manufacturing of the blood supply, but also dictated the protocols for resolutions, corrective actions, etc., and they're carried out with on-site FDA supervision, which is no picnic, let me tell you. The situation put me in close proximity with the FDA inspectors on a daily basis. At the time, I remember believing that this was an example of how our government was actually doing something right, pursuing a noble goal of protecting the public, blah, blah, blah. Man, ignorance is truly bliss. Another experience that had me interested in going down the regulatory career path in the orbit of the Food and Drug Administration was the events of the AIDS epidemic with respect to testing blood for the HIV antigen. And so I'm not to bore the crap out of you regarding the different test types like ELISA, RIA, nucleic acid testing. Just know there are a different variety of methodologies that have been developed since that time. However, in the beginning, there was only a test for the antibody to the virus. The problem with this was that there was no way to detect the HIV antibodies during the 6 to 8 week window period. So that was a problem between the HIV infection and the evidence of antibodies in a donor's blood. Enter the HIV testing wars. 2 different companies battled it out to see who would be the winner between the 2 test methodologies that would close the window so that disease could be detected earlier. Abbott and Ortho were the 2 companies, if memory serves. And it's been a long time. But the ARC was ground zero for all testing validation. But the point is, I believe that it was all fair and the best test won and all other, naive cliches that I can come up with. I was wrong about a lot of that, but that's for another day. The point is, watching all this pushed me into another degree. The chemistry degree I was speaking of earlier, and a new career path, pharmaceuticals. This is where I started to learn that my 2 careers were not really 2 different worlds as I had first suspected. Both the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry were part of the same entity. These 2 made up the monstrosity known as the medical industrial establishment. Though I like to call it the medical industrial complex, I feel it's a better descriptor. It's similar to the military industrial complex, which is kind of fitting since human beings are the currency of each of those entities. But I didn't wake up and get the hell out of the matrix at that point yet. I was still in the pod. I believed in the noble goal of the FDA and that these medical establishments still gave a crap about healing people, just like, the old country doctors back in the days of your youth. The internet is like everything else, both good and bad. But now that we have access to way more knowledge, we're finding out that behind the scenes, everything is not how it appears. But at the time, I didn't know. So I got my first chemistry degree and I went into the world of pharmaceuticals. I worked in solid dose, liquid dose, parenterals, controlled drugs, aseptic, and sterile processing. I wanted to see it all. Mainly because down deep, I was still secretly a professional student. I climbed the ladder, was very financially successful. Everything was great until I started to work in clinical trial manufacturing. That is where I started to feel a disturbance in the force.
I felt a great disturbance in the force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. I fear something terrible has happened.
Just little things at first, but then it became crystal clear that this was no noble endeavor. This was big business. I could no longer look myself in the mirror and continue to work in that industry. It was that bad.
Oh, rotten. Chicken shit. Whole fucking system's corrupt.
I had worked with medical devices before, and those are different but under similar sort of regulations, so I didn't have to abandon my career, just adjust the product line. It is way easier to find medical devices that do actually help humans as opposed to harming them. I found a company that makes just that sort of product, and I have been working there since 2013. It is a smaller company as opposed to the enormous cash cows I was used to, like Pfizer and Lilly and Bausch & Lomb, where the yearly bonuses were close to half of your annual salary. But in the end, I have my soul, which I view as positive. So that's my background and why, although I'm not a doctor, I'm discussing all of this. I'm just a person who's seen a lot of these industries, and I like to run my mouth and talk about interesting subjects. I can't tell anyone what to do or how to do it, but I have a lot to say with respect to what I have witnessed myself in these industries and what I know from my own observation and testing. I thought about going to medical school, but I didn't find the subjects challenging enough, actually. It's a lot of memorization, I think, kind of like organic chemistry, which I found really boring. Also, I spent 1 year of college during my medical technology degree. I had to work as a slave, basically as slave labor for an entire year, where you're purposely treated like crap and hammered on by mean physicians with a God complex. I had my fill, thank you. Residents get way more. They get years more of that torture, which didn't sound like a picnic. That's why I later picked chemical engineering, because it seemed to be the hardest actual degree to pursue intellectually, with no working for free required. Pharmacology was also really interesting, and I really liked that too. It would have been much better because the doctors aren't taught anything really much about pharmacology or nutrition for that matter. And it doesn't have enough math for me. But anyway, I'm sorry I'm rambling again. I do that. So now for real life, which is the most important arena when discussing this topic of insulin suppression in carnivores and the laboratory tests that surround it. Take a listen to Kelly Hogan's personal account regarding this, and after that I'll give you my own personal account that distills everything perfectly. Okay, so this video is by Kelly Hogan, and it's called The Sugar Diet and Insulin Suppression, My Carnivore World is Shook. So I'm not going to go through the whole video, but I want to play you a personal account that she gives later in this video because it's very pertinent to what we're talking about here. So let's give it a listen.
But Dr. Cyrus also went on to say that he thinks it's a good idea for someone who is experiencing this extremely low insulin and higher glucose readings. So not high glucose and high insulin. This would not be the strategy for someone who is type 2 diabetic and still eating carbs, okay? So you've got lots of fire from the glucose and carbs and also lots of insulin in your body. So in that case, yes, of course, put out the fires and lower your insulin. But in this video, he was talking to people who have done that for a very long amount of time and people whose insulin is now very low. For instance, mine, 1.1. That is very low insulin. And he's talking to people who then are still continuing, even with low insulin, to have higher glucose readings of around 100. And he says he thinks it's a good idea to occasionally give insulin something to do so that it does not become suppressed. Remember, insulin suppression. He says that this could be done by having a few berries in the morning. And I know carnivores were like, berries? That's going to be sweet. It's going to trigger addiction. I'm going to think about nothing but berries. And I have not.
She's extremely funny. If you have not subscribed to her, like, go check out her channel and definitely subscribe because she's just a delight. She's always been great. And I think she does coaching and things like that, but very helpful, very successful carnivore. Like, she used to have a lot of weight, like when she was in her 20s, I think, or earlier in her 20s, like she was way obese and stuff. So just to give a plug there, I'll definitely, this video will be in the description, so check out the whole video for yourself because this is just a portion of it that we're going to look at.
Tried one single berry, not one, in my 15 years of carnivore, not one bite of fruit. When I say carnivore, I know some of you are like, well, you drink coffee. Well, that isn't going to do diddly squat for insulin, okay? It's not going to trigger any insulin response. As far as consuming any carbohydrates, I have not. not in 15 years. And I don't plan to start adding fruit and berries. I don't know that I could handle it either. I was a severe sugar addict. I do not play when it comes to sweet tastes. I have never even tried one packet of flavored, sweetened electrolytes. Not one. But he did say that this could be done by adding 1 cup of regular milk. So 1 serving of milk has 12 carbs. And he says just a serving of milk per day would do the trick. He has tested around with this, that it would give just enough for insulin to have something to do, that it will react to the carbs in the milk, put out that very tiny fire, and not elevate insulin to the point of insulin resistance, but at least wake it up enough that you aren't insulin suppressed. I did enjoy hearing about this carnivore approach, the non-berry, non-addictive carnivore approach to it. I have not tried this yet.
It's true. People forget, because most carnivores who have had to lose a lot of weight, we are like carb phobic when it comes to like anything with carbs in it, because we kind of equate carnivore to being no carbs all the time. But technically, milk is considered carnivore. It's not like lion diet, but I mean, it's carnivore. It's just, it has carbs, and most of us kind of put that in the category as all the other carbs, but technically it's carnivore. So she's right about that.
But I am open to the idea. My own A1C at my recent check was 5.2. That is perfectly healthy. It's great. It is actually a little higher than it used to be in my first several years as a carnivore. And yet my insulin is really, really low. So I do find that interesting. If my A1C is going up, even little bits, and I've heard of this happening in a couple of the other longtime carnivores, their A1C is going up slightly, and yet their insulin is really low. I have not considered that to be a problem. Dr. Bickman has shared studies showing that metabolic rate increases when we're in ketosis and when insulin is low. And I think that's partly why I'm able to eat way more in the last few years than I ever have before in my entire life without gaining weight. Cool. That's actually a lifelong dream of mine. That was the goal. Awesome. So I've had no complaints about my low insulin and normal A1C. But I really have worked with some people whose insulin has continued to come down, while their A1C is slowly creeping up. And as much as I would love to ignore or forget what Dr. Sivas has said, I cannot just completely push that out of my head. I have recently gone as far as purchasing a small container of whole milk just to see what would happen if I gave myself a very small amount of, hopefully, not addictive carbs. I have not gotten up the nerve to try this yet.
I would abuse it probably, because I used to love milk. I used to love drinking milk, and I would most likely abuse it. So it wouldn't be something that I could just put down, I'm pretty sure. But that's me.
Because I'm feeling really good. I'm at a good place. I don't want to mess it up. I love everything about carnivore. I love how I feel. I love how I look right now. I'm
great.
Really happy. I'm sleeping great. I have no complaints. But I'm also a very curious person. So I am considering it. The little tiny carton of milk is still sealed and is sitting in my fridge right now. And I will keep you posted on if I do decide to try this. If any of you have tried adding back to your carnivore diet a very small amount of carbs, I would love to hear how that goes for you. Please feel free to reach out in the comment section. I have been honestly too afraid to try. I know that sounds silly, but things are going well and I don't have any reason to try it yet. So here's where I am right now. All of this sugar diet stuff, the FGF21 stuff, and this insulin suppression talk with Dr. Sivas, it's all just been swirling around in my mind. It has left me with a very unsettled feeling. I don't like feeling unsure.
Also, the clown cars continue to drive in the other rooms.
Natalie, what in the heck is all that racket out there?
Some kind of behemoth from beyond time and space, Dr. Buckle.
Oh, for the love of Pete.
So, the squealing, the knocking, the the banging the dogs outside. I don't have dogs, but my neighbor does. All of the ruckus, I would never record if I did not ignore that. So I am sorry if it is annoying. Hopefully it can't. I don't know. Hopefully maybe the microphone doesn't pick it up if I'm lucky, but I'm never usually that lucky. Just saying.
I like feeling like I know everything. And I suddenly feel like maybe I don't know everything. So I was talking to my daughter, Julia. I told you in a recent video, she is my 14-year-old daughter who, she's the one who always says, well, at least when something is going on, she looks for the positive. I love that. But she said, Mom, I really think you just need to pray about this. And I have been. I told her, baby, I have been. I've been praying for wisdom and clarity. And then I talked this out with my husband. He said, Kelly, I think you just need to go on here and tell people where you are right now. Where are your thoughts? Even though you don't know where this is going, you don't know everything. He's like, maybe just tell them that. So that's what I'm here to say today. I don't know everything. I know what some of you are thinking. Yeah, we know. I also think in moments of uncertainty and when your head is spinning, it can be very useful to say, okay, let's step back. What do I know? I know that in every single meeting that I host, people come on screen, and when I say, what are your updates? People come on to not say, this is what they don't come on and say. You know what? I discovered that eating bags of candy is the answer. They don't come on screen and say, I've been adding back all these carbs and I feel great. That's not what I have heard for the last 4 years. Week after week. And I host 8 hours of live meetings per week for 4 years. Here's what I know.
That's a lot of people in a long time. And that's what I think is extremely valid about what she is about to say.
Come on and say, when I cut out carbs and replaced it with meat, I feel better. My brain comes back online. I have mental clarity I've never had. I stop obsessing about sugar and food all day. I can eat a big meal of meat for breakfast and don't think about food for hours. And that's never happened for me before. That's what I hear. I hear people say, my hands weren't working well before. A lady this week, she's a dog groomer. It requires a lot of constant opening and closing of hands, scissors, and holding on to the shaver thingies, lots of brushing. She said her hands were killing her before. Now she's eating a total carnivore diet, not with whole milk, not with berries, just total meat diet. In fact, she's avoiding dairy. And she said she's never felt so good. She can work all day and her hands function. People who talk about how they used to take Advil all day for inflammation, they now don't need it. People who are insomniacs for years, who are sleeping. People who were diagnosed diabetics, who are now off of all medications. I have people on this channel all the time to share these stories. Group member breakthroughs, carnivore breakthroughs. I don't compensate.
You can also see that many testimonies on Dave Mack's channel, and so many others. So unless all these people are making stuff up, if that was a phenomenon, I would say that it would be rare or more rare or less common. I don't know, but I'm just saying there's her accounts of all these people are the same thing you see a lot of other places. So
compensate them in any way. I just say, would anybody like to show up and share? They don't get free anything for doing it. They just feel so good that they want to pass that on. And that's what I've been doing here for 15 years. That I know, no matter what anybody is saying, I know what I've experienced. And I know hundreds, now thousands of people who have said the same thing in YouTube comments, on Instagram comments, in meetings. That's what I know. I know that my own grandmother, I know because I watched her my entire childhood and growing up years. I watched my mom's mom avoid fat like the plague. fat-free. Everything that was made fat-free, I can't believe it's not butter, margarine, fat-free mayonnaise, fat-free salad dressings, everything in her fridge, fat-free. And she had a voracious sweet tooth. She ate so much candy. She would go to the grocery store and she would check out and it would just be lined up with bags of candy. She was very thin. She really was. That was her big fear. She was very fat phobic. She did not want to ever gain weight. And she didn't. She stayed very, very thin until she died. Also, and she drank a lot of Mountain Dew. That was her drink of choice. She lost the ability to speak, to walk. She did not seem to recognize any of us, and she eventually lost the ability to even drink her Mountain Dew through a straw. She had to be coaxed on how to swallow. And then she died at age 86, completely unable to do anything for herself, including speak. So I know that avoiding fat is not a great idea. I mean, that's what I've seen in my own self. I tried the fat-free thing. I grew up in the 80s. I was born in 79, but I grew up in the 80s and early 90s where we just knew eating fat would make you fat. And now these days, I'm eating 300 to 350 grams of fat per day. And I feel so good and I'm not getting fat. So I keep trying to go back to, okay, what have I actually seen? What have I experienced? What have I seen in other people? And then I'm also at this point trying to keep an open mind to hear what other people are experiencing without discounting what I have also lived. So all of that is making me truly rethink, what is my job as a coach or a teacher in my groups and even on this channel? My job is not to come here and only push my agenda and push what has worked for me. I think my job is to share my own experiences, my own truths, what has honestly been the ticket for me, and to allow other people to share their experience as well. I think my job is to also keep my ears open, to learn, and to bring to you what I am learning. And then as people are curious and experiment, part of being a coach is to say, okay, let me talk you through why this could be happening, why you're experiencing it, to share what I have learned from myself. And through all of the things, I try to really listen and learn and stay up on what people are talking about, and then try to dig deeper into the science of how is that possible? Why would that work at all? And then to help people track their own body's responses, whether that's through a journal or through some of my tracking sheets that my group members use for those that are ready to do that, either digital tracking sheets or printable tracking sheets, to help them take note of, okay, well, how did that affect not just the scale, but my body fat, my muscle mass? How did that affect my bowel movements and my sleep, my mood and my energy? All of it is part of health. And I don't believe that all of the health benefits, the people being able to walk and use their hands better and getting mental clarity, all of these health benefits would have come from just eating nothing but either watermelon all day or bags of candy all day. And I know that, I know that not everybody doing this sugar diet thing is just eating bags of candy. Some of them are doing it completely with fruit. And maybe that is working for people. I do want to learn what is working for actual people. I want to understand.
Okay, so she is also commenting on the sugar diet. So that's kind of a combo video. But if you want to watch the entire video, check it out in the description section. So the takeaway from Kelly's video that I was most interested in was all of her reports of the people in her groups that have come to her with all these problems, and they started carnivore and they have reversed their medical conditions. Their quality of life is better. They've lost tremendous amount of weight in some cases, and there's in a lot of cases actually. And all of this information, which is real life. It's IRL. So that to me is something that we need to focus on mainly is how do you feel? Do you eat food that makes you feel good, or do you eat food that makes you feel terrible? That is the most important aspect of this. I especially appreciated her account of her grandmother and how her grandmother's eating habits were and what she suffered from later in life. I can tell you that's where my own personal story comes into play. I've discussed here my own account with carnivore and the fact I had a laundry list of conditions and now I don't anymore. But my mother and father, my father died when he was in his 70s, and he died of arterial sclerosis. And I will tell you that I remember vividly in the late 60s and 70s, actually earlier than that, a little bit earlier than that, because if you look at when Crisco came on the scene, my father grew up on a farm, and they ate a lot of animal fats and stuff. But when they were in like their 30s and 40s, somewhere around in there, Crisco actually was invented, and seed oils. And so the public was told, well, if you want to be healthy, you've got to eat seed oils all the time, because seed oils, get rid of animal fats, eat seed oils, right? So my mother started actually making all of the food with Crisco and different oils and stuff. And my father later suffered from arterial sclerosis. He had to have several operations where the artery in the center of his body was replaced because it was blocked up and everything. And he had other conditions and things like that. He also didn't sleep very well. He had a lot of problems. He ate a lot of vegetables on top of eating. He ate meat still, but I remember some summers he would have a garden and he would plant a lot of stuff, and he would eat a lot of beans. He ate a tremendous amount of cornbread, and he would drink whole milk, but he would drink a lot of, he would eat a lot of cornbread, bread. Every meal had to have bread, and he ate a tremendous amount of bread and grains and stuff. So biscuits and what we used to call in the South hoe cakes. I don't know where that name came from, but it's kind of funny. So he died at 76. He had complications from one of his surgeries that he had, actually, to get rid of to change the artery out, the artificial artery or the fake artery. He contracted hepatitis C, but he didn't know it. This was years ago. And so he ended up dying of complications from hepatitis C, but he still had like cardiovascular issues at that time along with that. So, the whole time my mother is trying to keep him safe and healthy. And, we all know how that ended. We know that all these things are inflammatory and causes a lot of health issues. And you're avoiding meat, and you're avoiding animal fats, which is something that you need. My mother, on the other hand, now he was always thin. I can say that he was always thin, and he didn't have a sweet tooth. He didn't eat cakes and pies and things like that. He was a bread man, but he did eat a lot of bread. And for somebody that ate that much bread to be as skinny as he was, maybe that's where I got it from. When I was growing up, I was always thin, but naturally thin. I could eat anything until later. But he was, she was not like that. She was obese. My mother always had a big weight problem. She also had a food addiction. She would eat sweets non-stop. I mean, all the time. She would also drink soda. She would eat lots and lots and lots of sugar. She also had been diagnosed with arthritis at like in her 20s. So she always suffered from arthritis. She took a lot of Advil, things like that, messed up her stomach. She had digestive issues, like major digestive issues. Like they thought they were going to have to do surgery on her. She had diverticulitis. She had diarrhea all the time. She always had loose stool. Like she could never fix that. She always had a messed up stomach. So that was her life. And she died. She ended up dying of, this was right before not that long before 2020 or 2019 and all that happened. She had to go in a nursing home. She had a heart attack and congestive heart failure in the end. But she couldn't hardly walk in her later years. Like, it was hard for her. Now, she kept going. Like, she didn't ride around in a wheelchair or anything, but she had trouble getting up, getting in the shower for years. And it was hard for her to move around the house. It was hard for her to clean her house, things like that. So in the end, it's like, but she ate sugar to the end. Like, her favorite thing to do was to eat, basically. And she would want to eat like sweets and candies and things like that. And, it didn't do her any service in the end. And she was always obese. She stayed obese the entire time. So that's what I saw. That's the results of the 80s and 70s. All of that, all of this new seed oil thing, the processed foods, and she loved processed foods like frozen foods. Anything that was processed, she loved it. And I remember in the household when they didn't buy butter. I think my entire life, like, they didn't buy butter. They would only buy margarine, and that's horrible, horribly inflammatory. So everything was replaced with a processed alternative, in our house. Whereas when they grew up, they ate the food off of the farm. They ate whole foods. So I directly link that crap processed diet and all the modernization of our food, supply to what they experienced and the problems that they had. So I can relate to Kelly's story because, there's other things, like my grandfather had Alzheimer's. I mean, the disease rates are just skyrocketing since all of that processed food came on the scene. Before a lot of that, of the industrialization of our food supply, you didn't see most of these things all the time. So, and if you look at graphs, like it correlates with the processed food, there's a lot more prevalence of it to the actual disease. So that's something that hits home to me. I wish, we wish we would have known what we would have known. And I ate like that. I didn't feel worth a crap back in the 90s. I felt terrible when I was just avoiding fat, because I remember my brother and I, we avoided fat at all cost. At all cost. I mean, we were dry chicken and rice. That was some sad times, let me tell you. If you want to feel like crap, eat dried chicken and rice all the time and see how that makes you feel. And avoid all fat. And I mean chicken breast, like not even the part of the chicken with fat on it. So that's my account of why, when we're looking at lab testing and you're sitting here hyper-focusing, you got your CGM and you're constantly chasing this result, my advice is to start with how you feel. Now, personally, I haven't been to a doctor in a very long time. You know why? I haven't been to the doctor in over 3 years, because 3 years ago, after that last ER visit, when they let me down for the last time, I had no use for them anymore. Because why? Now, I'm not going to say I haven't gotten lab tests, because I have. A few of the usual things that you would do, or, like high-level stuff. But I go by the fact that all of my diseases are gone and I'm healthy. It's like everything was reversed. Every time I went to the doctor, they made it worse. Every single time. Or they did nothing at all, but order a lab test that I could get myself. So it's not a service that provides very much of anything, to be honest. When I went to, for example, one of the times that they let me down is before I actually even went keto, or it might have been around the time I started to do keto or something like that. I went to my doctor and she said my thyroid was messed up. And I had seen a little bit, this is even before I really kind of started understanding about the food, but I had started dabbling into the fact that the food supply was tainted. It was just like processed garbage. And I was at my doctor's office and I said, I think I'm going to take nascent iodine. some people take Lugol's or whatever, but I had started to see that, because of we don't practice regenerative farming, all of the iodine is stripped from the soil, stripped from the plant, so it's not in the plants. The cows eat the plants, and the cows don't have a lot of it either. And it's just an industrialization thing, it's because of industrial farming, and if you don't live on the coast or you're not eating a lot of seafood, things like that, like, you're not going to get it. And a lot of people are iodine deficient, and all of the cells in your body need iodine. Or virtually all your cells in your body. So it's extremely important. And if you don't consume iodine, your thyroid you kind of can become bromine toxic if you're eating garbage foods, because all the ultra processed food is full of bromine. Now, bromine and iodine are halogens, so they have similar kind of a structure. So it's kind of like running on bad gas. When you don't have any iodine, it's like your body is like, well, what's that? That looks kind of close. Let's use that. It's like close, but not that good. So your body ends up trying to use bromine instead of iodine, and it's just it can make you feel like crap. It's not good. And a lot of things are brominated. If you see something that's brominated, stay away from it. So I knew that most people were iodine deficient. And so I told her, I said, I'm thinking about taking nascent iodine. She looked at me as if I told her I was going to go in the garage and turn up a gas can and just start drinking it. She goes, no, that's toxic. And I'm like, God, where'd you go to medical school? I mean, honestly, I really wanted to know, because I'm like, are you crazy, lady? What is wrong with you? I mean, this is a nutrient that you have to have. And I didn't yell at her or whatever, She was hateful a lot of times, because as I started to become educated because I had already been I'm a medical technologist, a pharmaceutical chemist, I have a background on all this crap, but I didn't know how toxic the garbage I was eating was, I probably should have had a feeling down deep or something, but even me, I didn't wake up and realize what I was doing to myself. But I did know that was true. I knew that was a fact, and I'm like, no, it's not. It's a supplement, and you get a good supplement, and it's like, maybe this will fix things. And she really wanted me to take, because it was like low thyroid. She really wanted me to take the drugs. And I said, I think I'm going to try the supplementation first, So months later, I come back, and I've been supplementing, and we did labs. And so I had to stick it in her face because, she wasn't the nicest person. So she's like, and I said, oh, those are my labs. Oh, look at that. Well, how about that? That toxic sludge that I was drinking actually fixed my problem. So all of the, results were normal again. And I felt better. I was even still really fat, and I felt better though. I felt way improved just from taking the iodine. So that even fixed, that reversed that condition. So at that point I wasn't, I didn't have the hypothyroid condition anymore. She wasn't happy. She was annoyed that I brought that up. She was annoyed with me. She was annoyed that her patient got better. Think about that. We need to think about these concepts once in a while. We really need to think about what that means, okay, and what we're doing. Because one of the things that I notice is that I did this. We keep going back to these physicians and we need help, and we're sick and we feel bad. They give us drugs, and they either don't fix the problem, mask it a little bit, or cause additional problems. And in fact, the drug model is just that. A lot of the drugs that are made, they're made so that they have additional side effects, so that they can be treated, the side effects can be treated with additional drugs. So this is not a noble industry where, overall, I'm not saying there aren't individuals who do care, but it's like, overall, this is a machine that will chew you up and spit you out. That's what it is. So I remember going to the doctor needing help, and all I did was get hooked on, or not hooked like a junkie type of thing. I never really got addicted to much, but I would go to the doctor needing help, and I would end up on just another drug. And some of the drugs caused me, I've discussed this in a previous video, I had grand mal seizures because of the combination of a drug. That's why I would never, ever, ever ask a physician about drug combos. Never go to a pharmacologist. Go to a pharmacist if you want to know drug interactions, because doctors have no clue. They'll shell out. They'll just give you everything just about, like, and you mix all kind of things. At least a lot of them do. Now, I'm sure there's some that would, at least try to check or do some due diligence to not hurt somebody. But a lot of them hurt people with the amount of the different types of drugs. And then you'll have people going to 10 different doctors. So they'll go to 10 different doctors, and each doctor will give them something. And then in the end, they're mixing all kind of things that are lethal. Usually, I think the software that's used by that's used by like drugstores now kind of can watch for that. It actually, it searches a database for things that conflict. But don't ask a doctor for any kind of advice on medicines, because they don't know. They get very little pharmacology, from what I understand, or the last time I checked, and the last the physicians that I talked to when I was in college and they were in college, it's like they were surprised that they didn't really learn much. So, that's the problem, is that we keep going back to, we're this complex. And keep in mind, the lab test, the physicians, what they do, they get a lab test, they're going to react to it. And all of the laboratory tests, like a lot of them, are based on very sick, screwed up populations. So it's not normal in that you're healthy if you're in this range. One of the examples that Ken Berry gives is a fructosamine level of 0 to, and I can't remember the higher end of it, was normal. That was on paper. It was documented that was normal. And he said if you were at a fructosamine of 0, you'd be dead. This is the establishment that you are worshiping, and this is the reason that you have to be careful. So they will make laboratory tests with a treatment in mind. So keep that in the forefront of your consciousness when you're actually looking at what kind of services you're getting from the medical industry. I had many different encounters where I'd go to the doctor, I'd go to the ER, wherever it was, and nothing, or either made worse or either drug. So in the end, if you were hiring someone to fix your house, and you had a roof leak, and you had to have a new roof or whatever, and they put a new roof on, and then they or let's just say contractor, okay, a contractor in general, a contractor, and you hire them to fix your house, and they put a new roof on, and the roof leaks, and then you go back to them and say, hey, fix my plumbing. I need you to replace my plumbing. I need you to replace my sink. I need you to add a room onto my house. And every time they make things worse and they screw stuff up, why are you going back to that same place? Why do you keep going back to that same individual who keeps making things worse for you? In the end, I didn't have to get a bunch of new prescriptions. I didn't have to go to a bunch of specialists. I didn't have to keep going back to these people that keep letting me down. All I had to do was change what I eat. And it fixed everything. I am not the only person that is claiming this. And I am not lying. It is true. The people that are adamant about this and the people that go on these different channels and give their testimony and stuff, they're not making this up. Now, there may be somebody who does, I guess. But you can tell when you watch people who are so desperate and sick and they just got their whole life back, you can tell the difference between that and somebody that's making up a story. But again, I don't really know why they would, for attention or something. I don't know. But the point is that there's a lot of us out there who have fixed everything. Now, if I get lab test and it shows, which I don't remember what my A1C was years ago, but like if it showed that my A1C from the beginning of carnivore to now was slightly elevated, would I ditch all of this for that so that I could start eating carbs and feeling like shit again? No, I would not. Now, I keep an open mind, though, and I monitor things like this, scientific things that or scientific studies that come out. And I do kind of keep my ears open for stuff like that. But there's always something coming down the pike at any given time. There's always people researching things. And what you have to understand is that when people are doing research and they're doing all these different tests, you know, show this, that, or the other thing, and they have these revelations, a lot of it comes down to the researchers' conclusions of things. But conclusions and, you know, looking at a bunch of results and coming to that to a determination of what it means is not the same as objective evidence and absolute proof. It's not. And one of the things that makes this hard is, think about this. And this is why I have a problem with things related to nutrition and what you're eating and then studies that they do. Everything that I do with respect to testing is absolute. It's absolutely controlled, and it's 100% valid. Okay, because it's inert stuff. It's not humans, right? So I'm talking about like analytical testing of a drug or something like that. And I have validation with respect to that. I can validate the fact that all of my test parameters were set up correctly. My method was validated. Everything's in order, right? So it's absolute when it comes to the type of thing I'm talking about. With humans, and when you're drawing conclusions on nutritional testing, and we all know that the way that they did the survey stuff they did, like a lot of the times, you know, you'd hear on the mainstream, don't eat eggs because eggs are bad for you, blah, 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 or coffee's bad for you, or coffee's good for you, or eggs are good for you, or milk's bad for you, or milk's good I mean, you constantly hear these different things, right? And there'll be studies to base that on. But what you don't understand is that a lot of these studies, or what they were calling studies, were actually interviews and questionnaires. So a lot of nutritional information is based on interviews and questionnaires, where they're like, how many burgers did you eat last year? Or that sort of thing. And that's completely invalid. That is not scientific. In fact, that's bullcrap. So nutritional science is kind of an oxymoron in my eyes. It's not scientific. In order to be scientific, there was a study where this was done, which is interesting, but I can't remember the name of it. It had to do with an institution. It was very immoral what they did. But if you had people and you locked them in a room, okay, you locked them all in a room, and they had similar, I don't know, physical characteristics. They had similar health history. They had similar, like you were able to kind of make them as like for like as possible, the people you picked. And all the same sex or something like that. You put them all in a room, each one of them in their own room, and you locked them up, and you wouldn't give them anything but water and whatever it is you were studying, right? All similar weights, everything. You can come, if you were to do something like that, you would have more valid data coming out. But nobody's locking anybody up in a room. Nobody's got cameras on them watching to prove what they consume, how often they consume it, and the fact that they're not doing anything else, right? Plus, trying to get that many people that are that similar so that you can control it, good luck with that. You know? So if they did things like that, and then they get these results, and they're looking at these different parameters, you might be able to come to some conclusions about that. The problem is that it's like 52 card pickup. I mean, with just the variables are just insane, first of all, and who had a camera on these people 24/7 to watch to see that they actually ate the way that you said they're eating? You know, I mean, how do you know what they're doing and what they're eating? I know a lot of people who thought that they were doing carnivore, and again, like they didn't pay too much attention to the name. Like a lot of people who were eating avocados and things like that, and they had digestive issues, and they were like, well, I'm doing carnivore, you know, and they kind of were getting keto and ketovore and carnivore like mixed up, and they were having problems. And then when you talk to them, they're like, oh, but I eat avocados, you know. So you have things like that goes on. But this is what is important to remember about lab testing, nutritional, like blood testing with respect to people. anything you put in your body is going to change these parameters. Just like Nick Norowitz proving that if I eat a bunch of, like they make a determination. Okay, they make a determination when you go to the doctor and your LDL exists. They're like, oh, to put you on a statin. Oh my God, you need a statin, right? And they want it like 0 and all this kind of crazy stuff, which you need LDL for your health. You need it for immunity. But in an example like that, they're making a determination. You walked in, they did a test, and you might be fasting for a small amount of time or whatever, maybe fasting, you know. They do an LDL value and they see that it's, you know, exists, and they want to put you on a statin. First of all, that's wrong scientifically. Somebody just walked in. You have no idea what they ate yesterday. You have no idea what they eat regularly, and they don't ask. They do not ask. They don't care. But Nick Norowitz just proved, he proved that, at least in his case, I think he did just himself or whatever, but he kind of showed how the lipid energy model, you know, works and everything. He ate the Oreos and he did a statin different times or whatever so that he could show what the effects are on cholesterol. His cholesterol went down significantly because he was eating Oreos. And he was saying because of the carbohydrates or whatever. But my point is, regardless of why that happened, so we're making a determination to put you on a drug because of one result that stands alone. They'll do that. They'll do that with blood pressure. They'll have someone come in, you go to the doctor, and let's say you're upset about something. You're upset about something that happened. You're stressed out from work. They'll sit you down. They'll immediately take your blood pressure. And most of the time you don't have your feet on the floor. You're supposed to technically sit there for a while, like so many, but you know, it's this like fast food industry. It's just like in and out, right? So they got to hurry. So you don't sit there for like 15 minutes to basically equilibrate or whatever. And then also depending on what's happening to you, because blood pressure is going to change based on, it's going to go up sometimes just because it's going up, because physiologically it makes sense to do that because of, you know, you getting upset, things like that. But you go to the doctor and they get a blood pressure reading, they'll put you on blood pressure medication immediately. Like if it happens, let's say it happens twice. Heck, I don't even think, like I've known people who immediately, because of an abnormal result or slightly abnormal result, they immediately got put on blood pressure medication. Not asking why, I wonder why, or I wonder if we need to look at something else. It's just, nope, independent by itself. That lab test made the doctor put you on blood pressure medication. In fact, when I had to go to the doctor pre-carnivore, I would notice that every time I went to see them, I would get a blood pressure spike. It would be abnormal. Not tremendously abnormal, but enough for her to mention it. And I knew how I was feeling. It was because I hated that woman. So every time I had to go there and she was going to threaten me with a drug, it's like I would get upset and I would be, my blood pressure would be a little off. I watched it all the other times. It never was any other time, you know? So it's like, but she wanted to put me on blood pressure medication just because of an independent result here and there. So, you know, that's called white coat syndrome, I think it's a thing, you know, but she took it as the opportunity to put me on another drug. So anyway, what I'm trying to get to is that, you know, you're looking at these things in vitro, you're looking at these things independently, and the human body works as an organism that is one huge like machine that is very complicated, and doctors are not God. They did not create you. They don't understand everything as much as they want to believe they do, and a lot of them have a God complex, and God help you if you question them. You know, it's just something you need to keep in mind. That's all I'm saying. So let me know in the comments section below what you think of all of this. The debate over insulin suppression, lab testing in general. What have you witnessed in your own life, from yourself and people around you, relatives? Has the carnivore diet worked for you? Has it not? I'd be really interested to find out. So if you actually like this information, please give me a like. And if you would like to subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.